want to direct our attention to the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17, beginning with verse 31. The word of the Lord is as follows. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. Me ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I've done this both to lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. Thus far, the word of the Lord. You may be seated. Saul replied, there's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club, rescue the lamb from its mouth. The animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I've done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. I want to preach today just from the subject, lions and bears. Lions and bears. In the task of shepherding, there are no more deadly a threat than that of lions and bears. In the food chain, lions and bears, they are apex predators. There isn't anybody badder or bigger or more terrifying on the food chain than lions and bears. Their weight, along with their force, are formidable and in many ways undeniable. You counted yourself lucky as a shepherd if you were never confronted by either of them, because they presented odds that were against your returning home. And even as I said that title, there were those of you who remembered the phrases lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. Those three are threatening, they are fearsome, they are problematic. You sought to avoid them at all costs. And if it was your lot to not avoid them, if by chance they came upon your path as you were leading your flock, you prayed that they would simply ignore you and your flock, allowing you to live and to be able to tell how you were spared. Every person has or will encounter lions and bears. Now, you may not be the type who hikes in the woods or goes on safaris in the jungle, but you will encounter some lions and bears. You will encounter forces, factors, and foes whose formidable weight and terrifying ferocity seriously threatens your survival. Because, friends, lions and bears are found in every life. Lions and bears can be people whose animus, whose ill will, whose lust for power prompt them to seek the destruction of your name, your influence, and your future. They mean you personal harm. They don't like you. Your existence is an irritant at best and a threat at the worst. And their warped perception of their survival is tied in their minds to your demise. Lions and bears. They can be systems and structures set in motion and reinforced by people that are corrosive. Racism, sexism, ageism present challenges and threats to you on a daily basis, seeking to cancel, seeking to deny, seeking to marginalize, seeking to depersonalize you. A lion and a bear can be a medical illness. It can be a medical condition. A diagnosis of cancer can be a lion and bear. A condition such as dementia can be a lion and bear. Lions and bears come to every life. An addiction can be a lion and bear. A lion and bear can be in your financial life. It can be bankruptcy. It can be foreclosure. It can be betrayal. It can be desertion. Lions and bears are anything that has the potential to consume you, to destroy you, to dismantle you. And even as I am talking, many of you are recalling your lions and bears. Even right now, you see their faces. You hear their rants. You hear their growls. You hear their howls. You see their size. You see their force and their power. Even as I'm talking, your mind is bringing the lion and the bear that was in your life, or even may still be in your life. And yet, as I speak, you are alive to talk about the lions and bears that you faced. You survived them, and not only did you survive them, you surpassed them. And friends, if there were ever a spot for a moment of thanksgiving and praise, it's right here. The fact that you are alive to think about the lion and the bear, you are right here. You were not consumed. You were not destroyed. You survived. You came through. You just didn't get through it, but you got past it. You got past the threat. You got past the danger. You came through the peril and through the horror and through the terror, and you came through the darkness. You are alive to even think about or talk about the lion and the bear. And here it is. There was a time when you didn't see surviving. You didn't see coming through. You didn't see getting over. You didn't see getting past. You didn't see potential. You didn't see possibility. And you definitely never thought you'd ever even want to talk about the lions and the bears that you faced, the abuse and the rejection that you faced. At the time, the memory was too fresh. The scars were too fresh. The pain was too deep. But you survived. And you're alive to talk about your lion and your bear. I believe somebody could even put in the chat section, I survived my lion and my bear. This is where we find David in our text. For 40 days, Goliath of Gath issued a challenge for Israel. Send out one person for him to meet for a winner-take-all match. And for 40 days, Saul and all of the men of Israel ran at the mere threat. On this occasion, David witnesses it and is unnerved by what he saw. He saw a Philistine fighter not simply defying Saul and his army, but also defying the God of Saul and the Israelite army. And in David's mind, this cannot stand. Somebody has to do something. Because, friends, there are times when seeing what you see so disturbs you that you know that something must be done. But there are moments and instances where things are mentioned, something is said, something is done that you just can't let slide by. When a school system allows a picture of an African American president to be associated with primates, that just can't slide by. No, somebody's got to do something and say something about that. When someone just rolls up in a grocery store and has traveled 200 miles, targeting a particular group of people who are identified in a certain type of way, that just can't slide. Just can't slide by. There are some things that just can't slide by. And for David says something's got to be done right here, because it's not simply that Goliath is defying Saul, but he's defying our God. This isn't just about a nation's pride. This is about our God. And Goliath is defying Saul, Israel, and Israel's God, and everybody, including Saul, is running away. Everybody is scared. Everybody is intimidated. Everybody is frightened. Everybody is running. Everybody is saying the same thing. Goliath, he's just too much. It's too dangerous. It's not worth the risk of our lives. Now, Ronald, David could halfway excuse most of the people because they didn't have weaponry that was comparable to Goliath. Now, he could understand most people running because Goliath had armor that they did not have. Because back in that time, the only people who were working with iron and metal forming weaponry were Philistines. And the only individuals in Israel to have weaponry similar to Goliath were Saul and Jonathan. And so David could say, I understand everybody but Saul and Jonathan running. Because Saul and Jonathan, they have javelins and spears and swords. With their being equally equipped, they shouldn't be running. But they ran also. Sometimes it's surprising. But David says, all right, if nobody wants to take him on, I'm your boy. And so he says to Saul, I'll take him on. And Saul makes this reply. Don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy. And he's been a man of war since his youth. David answered Saul with the following words. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. And when a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club. Rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. With Saul discounting David, David says, let me talk about lions and bears. Saul is talking about Goliath. David says, let me talk about lions and bears. What was once a nemesis and nightmare is now a point of reflection. Before he faced them, he couldn't talk about defeating them. Before he faced them, he could not lift them up for an example. But after facing them, after surviving them, after surpassing them, he lifts them up for reflection. Because, friends, the lions and bears that you've survived and surpassed are no longer viewed as your nemesis. They're viewed as points of reflection and, dare say, thanksgiving. Having survived them, having surpassed them, they've been demystified. They aren't the boogeyman that they once were. They aren't the abominable snowman that they used to be. Because when you come through and you come past, there is distance between you and them. And now they are points of reflection. They no longer produce anxiety and prompt fear. They are points of reflection. They are testimony. They are witness. Before he faced them, and even when he faced them, he didn't think he'd be talking about them the way that he is. They were the toughest that he'd ever faced. It was the most threatening that had ever come his way. It was the hardest thing that he ever had to take on. But having come through them, having surpassed them, he was content now with not just having come through and passed. He says, I've got to talk about what I've come through and what I've come past. And friends, let's just be real. Some of the lions and bears that you faced, just getting through them, just getting past them should be enough. Because not everybody survived the lion and bear that you survived. Not everybody came through. Not everybody surpassed. Some of the lions and bears that you faced drove other people crazy. And the fact that you're not losing it, that you didn't lose it, that in and of itself is a miracle. And for that reason, you may say overcoming lions and bears should be enough. Your testimony is millions didn't make it, but I was one of the ones who did. Am I talking to somebody who can look back and see what took others out didn't take you out? But because the Lord kept you and provided for you and protected you, and in your mind, that should be enough. Shouldn't having overcome lions and bears been enough? Shouldn't me having to face lions and bears and endure them and overcome them, shouldn't that be enough? But the text teaches us that sometimes the lions and bears are not the main events of our lives. They are the matches before the main event. They are the tune-ups for what is to come. And we discover that lions and bears that we face in the wilderness prepare us for the Goliaths that we face in the valley. Yes. It would be wonderful if the navigation system of our lives just involved the wilderness of lions and bears. But sometimes God's navigation, sometimes God's GPS, sometimes God's plotted path for your life will take you beyond wildernesses and put you in valleys. And in valleys, there are no lions and bears, but in valleys, sometimes there are giants. Giants called Goliath. In the valley of Elah, no lions and bears, but there is a giant by the name of Goliath. And with Saul saying that David is too young and too small and too experienced in battle, David says, let me present my record with lions and bears for review. He says, look, King, I faced too big and too strong all my life. Bears were too big. Lions were too big. Both were too strong. Both took him for granted. Both saw him as easy prey. Both had an advantage over him. Both were used to having their way with what was smaller and weaker than they. Both were used to seeing people run when they howled and growled. But when they messed with him, and when they messed with his daddy's sheep, they messed with the wrong one. He said, when they came, I went after them. I ain't run away. I went after them with a club. He said, I clubbed them to death. They weren't looking for him to come after them. They were looking for him to run away. They expected him to run at the sound of the roar or the growl, but they messed with the wrong one. Friends, we got to pull up lions and bears, not just for reflection, but also for review. Because it's the review that reveals that the lions and bears in your life just mess with the wrong one. When they came after you, they messed with the wrong one. When they came after your children, they messed with the wrong one. When they came after your marriage, they messed with the wrong one. When they came after anybody in your family, when they came after your ace boon coon, your road dog, they messed with the wrong one. When they came after your church, when they came after your pastor, they messed with the wrong one. They weren't ready for you to fight back. They weren't ready for you to take the fight to them. They weren't ready for you to defy them. They thought that you were just going to run, give in, give way, throw in the towel, but so you can high five somebody in the chat and say, but they messed with the wrong one when they messed with you. They didn't know that you would fight. They didn't know that you knew how to fight. They didn't know that you'd put grease on your face, pull your hair back. They didn't know that you knew karate and crazy. They messed with the wrong one. They didn't know that you'd bite, scratch, kick, punch, pick up anything that could be used. And if they caught you on the wrong day and you were packing, you'd shoot them and call the undertaker and tell them that you were dead. They messed with the wrong one. But not only did they mess with the wrong one in the physical sphere, but they messed with the wrong one in the spiritual realm, because they didn't know that the weapons of your warfare were not carnal, but mighty through God for the pulling down of strongholds, casting down every vain and high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, taking every thought captive and making it obedient unto Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when obedience is fulfilled. They didn't know that you knew how to pray and you knew how to call others to pray. They didn't know that you knew how to bind and loose. They didn't know that you knew how to plead the blood and the name of Jesus. They didn't know that you turned the plate down and fast until the power of God came down on your life. They messed with the wrong one when they mess with you. They didn't count on you having your loins girt with truth and you having on the breastplate of righteousness and your feet being shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace and you're having the shield of faith and the helmet of salvation. They didn't count on you knowing how to use the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. They messed with the wrong one. They messed with the wrong one. David pulls up the lions and the bears and say, look, I've been discounted all my life. And every time they mess with the wrong one. They mess with the wrong one. They mess with the wrong one. David pulls up lions and bears for recollection and review, but he also pulls it up for reference. For reference, listen to David. David says, I've done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. As David lifted his lions and bears for remembrance and review, he moves to a point of reference. And the point of his surviving and surpassing the lions and the bears was not him, but who was with him. The Lord, he said, rescued him from the claws of the lions, the claws of the bears. The Lord kept him in the fight and brought him through the fight. The Lord preserved him and protected him. The Lord gave him victory. The Lord made him to triumph. And the God who gave him victory over lions and bears is the God who will give him victory over Goliath. Because, friends, the lions and bears in our lives are points of reference to the power of God and his ability to face your Goliath. Because for every lion and for every bear, God was greater. God was stronger. God was more than. God knew more than. God had more than. God did more than. God provided more than. God directed more than. God planned more than. God lasted longer than. The real wrong one for the lions and the bears was really not David. It was the Lord who was with David. And friends, when lions and bears messed with you, they didn't just mess with you. They messed with who was on your side. They messed with the God who was with you as you took on your lion and your bear. The Lord, he's the one who is your rock and your fortress and your deliverer. The Lord is the one who is your shield and the horn of your salvation. The Lord is the one who is your high tower and your refuge. The Lord is the one who delivers you from the hand of your strong enemy. And somebody can say, if it had not been the Lord who was on my side, when I faced my lion, when I faced my bear, when I faced my situation, when I faced my predicament, when I went into surgery, when I went into chemo, when I went into dialysis, if the Lord had not been on my side, I would have wasted away. I would have died. But thanks be to God that the Lord was on my side. And with David lifting the lions and the bears as remembrance, as review and reference, Saul tells him, go ahead, player. Take your shot. And may the Lord your God be with you. Look now as David faces Goliath, who seeks to demean him and intimidate him. Oh, what am I? Am I a dog that you would come at me with sticks? I'm going to cut you up, and I'm going to give you to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. But David says, hey, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you, and I'll take off your head. And this day I'll give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. That then all the assembly will know that the Lord does not save with sword, spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and the Lord will deliver us into our hands. The Lord will place you under our control. The Lord will put you under my feet. The God who has kept me from lions and bears, that God is going to be the God that is going to keep me against you. Goliath does not realize that he's dealing with more than just David. He's dealing with the Lord who is on David's side. And David said, I just want to let you know that you really have messed with the wrong one. I know that you're seeing me, but there is somebody unimagined with me, somebody unperceived with me, somebody who has gone undetected on the Philistine radar and sonar. But that God is with me, and that God is going to be the God that is going to give you into my hands. And I'm not backing up. I'm not running away. As a matter of fact, David says, let me take you on. He runs towards Goliath, just as he ran after the lion, just as he ran after the bear, he runs after Goliath. And can I tell you, my brother and sister, it does not matter how different the opposition is. It's the same God who is on your side. And when you know it's the same God who is on your side, you don't have to back off because the opposition is different. The same God that gave you courage to take on the lion, the same God that gave you boldness to take on the bear, that's got to be the same God that gives you boldness to take on your Goliath. Why don't you just just put in the chat, it's time to run. It's time to run. It's time not to run away from Goliath. I'm running at Goliath. I'm running towards Goliath, because the God that gave me victory over a lion and a bear, that God is going to give me victory over Goliath. And this time, I don't have a club to pop him upside the head. He's too big for me, but my God has given me some expertise. I am multifaceted in my weaponry. I take a club for the lion, but I got a slingshot for a giant. Let somebody know, you are not a one-weapon individual. You have a multiplicity of weaponry at your disposal. And when you can't take a club, you take a slingshot, and the slingshot and the smooth stone, my God, takes the giant down. Am I talking to anybody here? Is there anybody who can say, I use more than one weapon? Sometimes silence is a weapon, but then sometimes you got to say something. Sometimes standing back is a weapon, but sometimes you've got to engage. Whatever you're facing, God says, I'll make it work. I'll make it happen. I'll bring it to pass. I'll open it up. I'll shut it down. And there's somebody right now facing a Goliath, but I want you to remember, you've got some lions and you've got some bears. You've got some reflection. You've got some review. You've got some reference. Your Goliath messed with the wrong one, because the same God who was with you against lions, the same God that was with you against bears, is the same God who is with you right now. And that same God has the same protection. He has the same power. He has the same provision. He has the same authority. Can I pull up one more witness? Even Jesus had lions and bears. The death of Jairus was a lion and bear. The death of the widow of Nain's son was a lion and bear. The death of Lazarus and burial and being in the grave for 4 days, that was a lion and that was a bear. But in each instance, Jesus came after them and brought them back to life. They were tune-ups for the real battle. They were just scrimmages for the real game, because Calvary would be Goliath. And so when Calvary came, Jesus said, you messed with the wrong one. The same God through whose power Jesus raised Jairus' daughter, raised the widow of Nain's son, raised Lazarus from the dead. That same God was with Jesus at Calvary. This was the same God into whose hands Jesus commended his spirit. That same God who raised Jairus' daughter, who raised the widow of Nain's son, who raised Lazarus from the dead, that same God raised Jesus from the dead. And when he rose, he said, all power in heaven and earth are in my hands. And when he told his disciples, I want you to go, he says, as you go, no, I'm with you, even always to the ends of the earth, so that you'll know that when they mess with you, they mess with me. When they rise up against you, they rise up against me. When they attack you, they attack me. And when I'm there, I'm always the wrong one, because I am the God who makes you triumph in all things in Christ Jesus. I want somebody to know, you can make it through your situation. You can make it through your storm. You can make it through your difficulty, because that God is on your side. That God is with you. That God has your back. That God is with you right now. I look at that young man right there, and I remember 11 years ago, a lion and a bear. Cancer took his mother away, could have taken him out, could have caused him to go on a path that was negative. But Mama gave him one gift. Stephanie gave him one gift. She gave him a knowledge of Jesus and a faith in God. And that God has led him, and now he's working with other young people. My friends, I don't care what you're facing right now. I don't care how difficult it may be. God is on your side.